Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Secondary Heroes podcast. This week, we're talking about Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Yes, that's the TV show. This is your host, Trevor, and joining me as usual is.
Hey guys, this is Prague.
And we have a special guest joining us.
This is Michelle. I was going to say I was a
Hey.
special guest, but Trevor took the words from me.
Yeah, well, you've been on our show before, so you're a returning special guest.
I'm a recurring character, I think, at this point.
There you go.
I don't
Recurring
get top
character, I
billing.
like it.
I don't get top billing quite yet. Maybe one day.
Might be sooner rather than later. We'll see what happens around here. So this show, we are on this because I know Michelle and I are big Lord of the Rings fans, and
Yes, we
we
are.
were probably eagerly anticipating this show, so
I
we're here to
definitely
talk
was.
about it.
I think since the time they announced it, I was eagerly awaiting what the Lord of the Rings show would be, and I think we can talk more about
And we will talk
that
about more.
phase of it too later.
Yes, Trevor. So explain to our audience what we do here. when
Yeah,
we review
that's
things.
pretty easy at this point. So, again, we're going to start off with our spoiler-free reviews of the show. Is it worth your time? It's a big investment. These shows are not short little bits. They are hefty episodes, and it takes a while to get through them. So, is it worth that time? Because it's an investment in a lot of different resources, both from Amazon and from you, the viewer, to get through this show. And so we're going to go spoiler free, and then we'll tell you we're transitioning over to the spoiler portion later in the show, and that's when we're going to analyze and dissect this series all the different ways. And I think you can't help but compare it to the Lord of the Rings that's already been on film in some comparison. So we're going to do that too.
Very well said. All right. Well, who wants to go first for the spoiler-free portion?
I'll go first. I never go first.
Oh.
Look
All
at
right.
me. I'm going to say, as somebody who loves Lord of the Rings very much and was very much looking forward to the series, and asked Trevor every day if we could start it because I did not want to wait for it to be over like we did end up doing. I was underwhelmed, immensely underwhelmed.
Immensely.
But I think, as I mentioned to Trevor earlier, after ruminating and having finished it for a little bit, that I think I was also thankful to get to visit that Laura and some of those characters in that world again. I just, I'd say I will still watch season 2.
Okay. All right, that's fair, I think. I guess since I'm the other big Lord of the Rings fan, I'll go next here and echo what you said. It was a disappointment. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to know what happens next. It was like, oh, that's right, I still have the show to watch. I'll watch it. Like, it's pretty to look at times. Obviously they spent a lot of money on this show, and it shows in some places, not in others. We'll get to that later. I will say that I'm the one question I kept asking myself is, do I like these better than the Hobbit movies? And that I'm not too sure about. I think I kind of don't care for them equally. Like, I just don't. I did not care much for the Hobbit movies, but I felt like I had more fun watching them. Like, I remember the feeling of like, it's goofy fun, whatever, entertainment. Whereas this, I felt like I was pretty bored and didn't care about any character in this show, like, at all, except for maybe one or two that I was okay with. It just didn't entertain me as much. There were moments and scenes that I actually do think are really well done, but I don't think that makes the whole series that great. So I would say if you're a huge Lord of the Rings fan, at least check it out, because it is fun to at least see some of these locations on screen that we never got to see in the Lord of the Rings films, because they don't exist anymore in that age. So that's kind of fun to see. Maybe some creatures and characters that don't exist, or maybe where they were beforehand. There's some intrigue there. I don't think I would ever recommend this to someone who is just a casual Lord of the Rings fan. I think they would be bored. I mean, if we were bored by it, I would think the casual fan would probably be very bored by it. So, underwhelming series, not great. I will still probably check out season 2, because that's just how I am with these things. But I'm not necessarily like chomping at the bit for it. So if it doesn't come for another few years, fine.
Yeah, I mean, as the person who isn't a big Lord of the Rings fan, does it? I mean, casual fan, if you've seen all the movies, like all 6 of the films, I don't know if you're a casual fan, but I'm still going into it where I don't really care about the map of Middle Earth. I don't care about the names of all the different species, and that's totally fine. But I feel like they put so much into set decoration, costume design, cinematography. You can appreciate all of that. The acting is relatively well. The part they stumble and fall flat on their face is the actual stories. You'd think that would be the one part that Lord of the Rings could absolutely nail, was the storytelling, and I feel like the storytelling just didn't make me care about any of the stories, because there's like 4 different stories happening at once, because we have all the characters merged off or separated, and they finally merged at the end. And I just didn't care about any of the stories. It's like, oh, now we're transitioning to this. Now we're transitioning to that. And I don't care. I don't care about any of these ancestors to the hobbits, or what Galadriel's been up to this whole time, or how they actually formed the rings in the first place. I don't really care. And they were trying so hard to make me care with everything else but the actual story. They didn't develop any of the characters. It doesn't seem like the characters' motives and intentions would shape into what we get in the actual films. I don't know. Like, I know it's a long time period, but they didn't leave us like, oh, that lays the groundwork for that. That totally makes it. They never gave us any of that. And to Prague's point, it was just boring. Like, there's sequences, like, I've watched it and I'll pause it and I'm like, God, that feels like it's been a long time. I'll tell Michelle. And then we look at it, it's been 20 minutes. It feels like it's been 2 hours, and somehow 20 minutes of the episode's only been watched. And I'm like, oh my God, there's still another 40 minutes to go. There's some nights where we would put it on, and then like an hour in the middle, we would just pause and look at our phones and talk about anything else.
I was
Forget
on
the
my
show
phone
was
a
on,
lot.
the TV would turn off.
I'm
and go to
never
standby by
on my
itself.
phone. But I was on my phone a lot.
It's a good sign when you're watching something that you pick up your phone because you're so bored watching it that you just have to do something else.
Yeah, and it's a slog to get through every single episode. Like, again, Worth Your Time is such a tough thing because it feels like time went longer. It feels like you're in school and you're waiting for those final minutes to tick off for the teacher to let you out. And it's just, those minutes are like the longest minutes on earth. And it's because I'm watching it, it's like there's all these scenes they just extend unnecessarily. There's just sequences of interactions and dialogues.
I had that note down.
Walking. It's like, these don't need, you just cut this. This episode's 45 minutes and it's a tighter script.
Yeah.
But this is The Rings of Power. It's now available for everyone to watch. And I was disappointed with no expectations or hopes going into it. I was still disappointed because
That's not good.
I felt like I'd rather be watching something else.
All right, well, let's go Mountain Doom on this show. Oh, we don't have Alex here today, so I don't know who wants
since
to do
Alex
the honors.
isn't here, if you do want to follow us on social media, you know all the social media platforms at this point. And if you don't, this isn't going to change that habit. So at Secondary Heroes, if you're a fan of social media, on all the different platforms you can think of, and we'll tell you about new episodes, what's trending in pop culture, and hopefully interact with you, and you tell us what you thought about Lord of the Rings Ring of Power. You can also leave us a voicemail and go to crossthestreamsmedia.com and find all of our past history, as well as on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review. It helps. And remember, all of this is free to you and it's priceless to us.
Heck yeah. Well said.
Cool. So that means it's spoiler time. Again, if you've not seen the show, there actually are some big things that happen. So this will be spoilers if you don't have any idea about what they were going to actually proceed with at this story.
It's hard to believe there's spoilers for something that's technically a prequel. Like, it's like House of the Dragon. It's like, is it really a spoiler? Because technically the whole history exists by the time we get to Game of Thrones. And technically, I guess if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, you kind of know most of the stuff that, should happen in certain ways and does not. So I guess that's where they kind of change things around. I guess they kind of wanted to keep people on their toes still.
You're like, let's rewrite history.
Like, it... So I'm just going to jump. I guess we don't have to beat around the bush.
Right.
No,
They changed how the rings are made.
Yep.
The very core concept
The very core concept of
story.
Lord of the Rings. They changed like the entire foundation of the entire series for, I guess, shock value.
And they waited till the last second too. So I
Yeah.
did not understand that.
it's like, I guess they could in season 2 be like, well, actually, you saw them forge the 3 elven rings. But before that, while Hildebrand, who is shock, surprise, later revealed to actually be Sauron.
Yeah, that was a big eye roll when that happened.
I was like, I wasn't expecting it, but they could have just done it the way it was supposed to be done.
Right, and not this weird. Never mind. Well,
I guess
think
because they
get to that
wanted
at
you
some
to
point.
build a relationship with him and care about him and be like, oh my god, I feel betrayed like Galadriel feels betrayed.
Yeah.
Or is supposed to feel betrayed.
That's my guess too. I think that's what they were trying for, and it did not work.
Yeah, but so I guess they could pull off in season 2 that in that whole time they made the other 16 rings, because technically those ones are forged
Right.
first, and then he takes those ones with him when he leaves. Or, well, technically he's supposed to come back and attack and steal them, but I'm guessing they're not going to do all that. And then the elves forge their rings separately, unbeknownst to him. So they, I guess, did that part. But considering it's called Rings of Power, they're like, so we're going to show the 3 elven rings and just forget the other ones when they get forged. Somehow Sauron has to have a hand in forging them, but they already know not to trust the human form
It's
he currently
weird.
possesses. Yeah, I guess they wanted that big twist at the end of the first season, but it seemed very premature to me.
I think they should have saved that for the end. Like, have him make the rings with them. They had no idea the whole time. They could have built that out for a couple seasons, I think.
Yeah,
They didn't. So here we are with that weird ending.
He's
that
supposed to
happened.
have like a fair form that fools the elves, and that's how he tricks the elven smiths into making the rings in the first place.
They were on that.
That didn't happen.
pathway.
Yeah, they were on that pathway.
He was there helping, and then they're like, "No, we're not gonna keep this going."
Nope. We found some scrolls. What is this about? Oh,
You lied about
Look
who
who it
you are,
is.
which means you're Sauron.
yeah. I did not care for that reveal or that moment where they're like yelling at each other on the boat. It was silly to me. Yeah, a little
it was
little too romance novel-y for me.
Yeah. It did add, it made me think of that scene in Fellowship where Galadriel's presented with the ring and she has her whole like
The overdramatic. Yeah.
and it's like maybe she's just reminiscing because she could have had all that.
That's my guess
definitely-
too. Yeah, I had that thought.
It paints that in a whole separate light. But when we were done with Rings of Power, I went and I was like, I haven't read the Silmarillion. I haven't read a lot of like the offshoot novels. And so I went and I just read histories from Lord of the Rings. And I'm like, well, that's wrong. They didn't do that. This never happens. I thought they'd just written Celeborn right out of the show. I was like, isn't she married? Or are they just never gonna? And she's like offhanded comment in like the last episode that her husband is dead. So
Strange.
I don't know.
Well, to before we get too far into this, the showrunners are brand new, and I don't understand why Amazon decided to give them this show. They're like, hey, these people that have never been showrunners before, that have almost no writing credits to their name, anything, any experience, but they would give. I mean, they hired some decent directors who have done a lot of stuff, but that's about it. Like, they're the showrunners themselves have never done anything before. Like, here's billions of dollars, go. Like, what a concept. That was a
definitely
brave,
shows.
bold, strange move that did not work. Now, say for example, this was their own narrative. There wasn't Lord of the Rings, and they came up with it. Like, I would think that they at least got the look right for a first time ever doing a big budget show. Like, they got the big budget looking stuff right. Like, to Trevor's point, everything looks great, right? They knew how to get the sets built properly and the cinematography, all that stuff. It looks top notch. So if they had done their own show and wrote their own story or something, but like give them like probably one of the biggest IPs like in all of fantasy or fiction in general to people who have never done anything before, well, it showed.
Yeah. It definitely.
So there's that. Well, let's go over maybe some positive things. Was there anything that you did like? Let's start there.
This is you want to talk? Sorry, I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, no, I would say the biggest highlight for me, like I said at the start, there's 4 main storylines. And I feel like the one with Elrond and Durin where they're actually in the Dwarven Kingdom, felt the most like Lord of the Rings. The other three didn't
Yes.
feel like Lord of the Rings at all. Every time they transitioned back to that storyline, I felt like I was in Lord of the Rings, and then they'd go somewhere else and it would lose that. And so that's definitely the highlight. Their relationship, their interaction, just all of the different ideas of dwarves. That was the best part.
Well, I think what made that story so great is that it's what makes J.R.R. Tolkien's writing so great, is that he deals with these characters that care about each other and what they go through, because, you know, what he went through in the war and the war buddies that he made, like, that translates to the characters in his books. And we don't see that with these other characters. We only see them with those two. So in that respect, it shines, right? And those two actors are great too. They work really well together. They had great chemistry. A lot of other people did not, in my opinion, have great chemistry on screen together. Especially was it Erendir and that woman mother
Bronwyn,
that worked in
who were
the
supposed to be
Bronwyn,
lovers.
who had absolutely zero chemistry, in my opinion. Which is tough too, because, you know, he's an elf. I mean, how much emotion can you show as an elf? But still, it just kind of felt like they were just kind of shoehorned in there. So. But yeah, I like that too. I liked what you said, like those scenes. They're just fun. I mean, the dwarves are amazing. They're fun.
It also, I felt, serves Lord of the Rings fans too, because it's Khazad-dûm. Like, we see Khazad-dûm in ruins,
right?
In Fellowship,
and now you see it in
its
glory.
Yeah,
yes.
And it was just cool. Like, when we went there, I'm like, this is Khazad-dûm. I'm like, this is where they fight the Balrog. I was like, you can see it in the architecture. Like, the bridge that Gandalf dies on is probably somewhere here. And, like, every time they, like, put in those little nuggets throughout the show, it made me excited. Like, when they bring in Elendil and Isildur and the Númenóreans, and I'm like, this is
right.
this is Aragorn's lineage. This is where Gondor comes from. And you can see it in the architecture. Like, it's the White City, but it's in Númenor. And I'm like, I get excited just talking about it, because those are the parts for me that made it exciting to watch. And I know people are like, well, that's just fan service. And I'm like, well, yes, it was. And I liked it.
You know, I'll agree. That's kind of what I enjoyed about the series the most, was that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing that city, and I knew what was going to come. But it was still exciting to see all that and to see where all that came from. The history, the lore of those characters was exciting for me. It did fall flat a few times, but I think overall I got the most excited when I got to see those moments. And then I felt like some of the music in those scenes were better than the rest of the series.
Because
the rest of the series kind of fell flat.
Yeah, I think because Trevor even noticed it a few times, it calls to the original music, which is so excellent. And I can't even think of any of the music from that show, like, at all.
Not at all. I mean, that was a big character. Like, that was a character in the movies, was the music. And very rarely do you have that in too many films. I mean, you have some great, you know, scores, but I think only John Williams is the only other person I can think of that really jumps out. Maybe Danny Elfman, who their music isn't just to help the story along, like, it's its own character, and you remember those scenes because of the music too. You know, you think of when I think of the Shire, I start humming that song. That's just how I do. And I don't do that with Rings of Power.
Which is interesting because wasn't it the same composer, Howard Shore?
No, Howard Shore only did the main title. He didn't do the rest of the series.
Okay. I know. I was like, I know I saw his name in the credits, which is probably why the main title, like, I can't think of it off the top of my head because we skipped it most of the time because it was very long
and very bad.
It wasn't great. It's definitely not the best intro out there.
No, it looked cheap, unfortunately. It looked like, I think I mentioned this to Trevor when we first started talking about the show, that it felt like a Days of Our Lives title opening. It had that, like, really cheap CGI title. I don't know. It was silly. I didn't like it at all.
It was just weird they went with sand. It was just so weird.
I don't get what that means. Like, what was,
I'm
like, maybe they're chiseling away at stuff, like, in the mines, maybe? I don't know. It's my guess. Or maybe it's the ash of Mount Doom. Who knows? Didn't make sense to me.
So kind of in the vein of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing about the show is kind of the setup they did for the next season. One of my favorite things in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is taking characters and putting them in environments that are unfamiliar to them. You send Frodo off on his journey when you have, like, just everything, putting Legolas with Gimli as unlikely companions, all that stuff, it builds those storylines. And I feel like they kind of set that up for season 2, where you have, we have Durin, who's been cast out. Like, he's no longer the heir to Khazad-dûm, but he still wants to help the elven people with the Mithril. Then you have the stranger, who is definitely Gandalf, and he's paired up with a hobbit because he's always had something for the small folk, and they're about to go on a journey together, and she is leaving everything she's ever known, just the way Frodo did. And I'm like, these are the stories I want. And then we have Isildur, who's missing, but is definitely alive because he plays a very big role later.
I hated that. I hated that. Why'd they make him go missing?
I have no idea. I was like,
So
we
dumb.
know he lives.
Or
He
dead.
literally has to
Oh,
kill
no.
Sauron. Like, he's kind of a big deal in this series.
Bad writing.
Yeah, but so it makes me intrigued. I'm like, are we going to get to see like the founding of Gondor? Are we like, we're probably not going to get to see the founding of the Shire because I looked it up and it happens like way later than when this series does.
Unless they do a time jump, they might. You never know.
They
With like
could.
a season 3
That's
or
true.
4 or something.
Galadriel and Elrond will just be the same. They'll just have to kill everybody else.
Pretty much.
And also,
recast.
now that Gandalf's not like a bumbling, unintelligible, like vagabond. Like, I'm like, what? I'm like, it's like, he's a lot, and he's Gandalf again. Like, the way he speaks, I'm like, okay, this is what I was missing. It's like, you need that eloquence that he was just lacking. And honestly, if Galadriel just stops being the show, I'd be totally happy about it. I think she was my least favorite character. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it. Oh my God. She's not Galadriel. I don't know what they were going for. I don't know if they're like, oh, over the next like 2,500 years, she like mellows out and stuff. I'm like, she's just not though. She doesn't have that mysticism to her. She's not like mysterious and wise and just everything we know Galadriel to be.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. When I first saw her on screen, I'm like, this is really off note. I didn't know how to put it, but I'm like, this is not Galadriel. And I didn't have a problem with the actress or the character necessarily. It just didn't feel like Galadriel. Like, if this were a different show altogether, fine. Yeah, but it really should have been a different actress. And that's not an offense to her either.
Yeah, if you haven't she'd been portraying a different character.
That's fine. Yeah. A different elf altogether, sure.
But she's not Galadriel. She's just not.
No. Nope.
Especially when you're doing casting, you have tape. Like, literally, it's like, look, this is how we want you to act.
Yep.
Acting
Kate
notes
Blanchett's
done.
still alive.
Just watch this.
It's right there. You can just talk to her. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is I did like the way she looked in like battle armor and stuff. Like, I think the actress really looked good in that. But to your point, like, if she were a different elf character, that was maybe a general of some kind, perfect. She'd be great. It just didn't feel like Galadriel to me.
No, she was a great elf.
Yeah.
But she just wasn't
great elf.
Galadriel.
Sure. Yep.
They also they changed the way her ring looks. Did you notice that? Mm-hmm. Nenya looks different. And I'm
unless it changes over time for some reason. But yeah, they made it look different.
I was like, it makes me think like everyone's going to compare it to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Okay. It was there first. It's a beloved trilogy. People love it. Like, I watch the extended editions regularly. I've watched the commentary. Like, I love it. And Trevor won't watch them with me because they're too long.
Yeah.
And so you can't help but draw those comparisons. And it's like, it almost feels like it's not supposed to be part of the same series.
At times, yeah, but I know that they were trying to emulate the series.
Yeah, obviously, because
but then, then at times it doesn't.
Like the color palettes are really good. Like, they obviously shot in New Zealand, so the scenery works really well. It just it definitely felt more part of Lord of the Rings than The Hobbit. Just even in just color palette.
I agree.
Like, I don't know why when they made The Hobbit, they're like, let's just turn that saturation like way up.
They also changed the frame rate, which kind of made things kooky.
It was just...
Didn't care for that.
He liked The Hobbit series.
No, I didn't.
Some people
I thought
had
you
to.
did.
That's your brother-in-law.
Oh, that's my brother-in-law. My bad.
Wow. I know people that do enjoy it. I mean, it was, as I said, I didn't hate it. It was just kind of forgettable. I was like, did I watch that one? What about the second one? Did I watch that one?
I know. I never watched Five Armies. I was just like, I didn't enjoy.
No,
the
I've
first
definitely
two
watched
enough.
that. Yeah.
So I know I need to at some point.
I think the Five Armies is the best. It is, because the video games is nothing but action. Yeah. But by best, I mean it's fine. It's not great.
It's the best of the worst.
I mean, I like the Smaug dialogue with
Well, Smaug's a cool character
Bilbo
because
and
he's a
Smaug have
freaking
really
dragon.
good dialogue sequences.
Dragons are always fun. Sure.
It's just everything outside of that.
Okay, sorry, this is totally off base, but just made me think. I like how they alluded to the fact that King Durin throws a leaf through a hole, and that's what wakes up the Balrog.
Yeah.
It's the leaf.
And then it just sits down there for the next 3,000 years waiting for Gandalf to
I'm
show up.
awake.
I was like,
Just gonna stand here and look at you guys the whole time down here.
Like, I thought the dwarves of Moria woke the Balrog because they actually mined the Mithril.
You would think that, right? You would think that.
That's literally what Gandalf says in Fellowship.
No, it's a leaf.
It's a leaf. He's like, you disturbed my home.
He's like, leave me alone. Sorry, I had to do it.
That's cool.
That was definitely a fan servicey moment where they they did not go back to the source material. Like, would it be really cool if the Balrog shows up right here as like a final tease of this episode?
The thing is, so I thought I was like, oh, so he's gonna attack them. No, it was just to show that he was there. But
That's it.
They tell the whole tale of how the Mithril came to be. I thought that part was really cool. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I never thought that's what Mithril was created from.
It's a great story.
It's a good story, and it shows like the whole why the Balrog exists and why it's in that mountain. That's all I needed. I didn't need anything more than that. But they're like,
nope,
no, on the nose. Just in case you guys forgot, there's a Balrog here.
Yeah. Anyways, what about you, Trevor? Is there anything else you liked? So maybe I'll try to figure out a few things here. What you think?
I mean, when the elves were slaves and prisoners of the orcs, and they're trying to figure out how to break out. When they actually do break out, it's a really good sequence. It's
a good action scene, sure.
It's just really good action sequences. There's a nice axe toss in there. And then also the very first episode, they're doing kind of a backstory of what's happened since the beginning of time up until where our story begins. And they show this eagle, and he gets killed in the fight, and it's so sad because he's one of the eagles, and he's just swooping down. He gets taken out in slow motion, and there's all kinds of fire and flame around. The eagles, man.
That was a well shot scene. J.A. Bayona did a great job filming that episode. I think he did the first two, and those were the best looking, I think. The battle scenes were good too. I think that episode was pretty good in terms of filming.
And then I think the biggest thing, like, I don't know if it's a spoiler, but the Southlands becoming Mount Doom. I mean, I didn't like. So it's tough. There's three stupid things, like three of the stupidest things I've seen in any show ever, where a monumental thing happens and they don't show any precedent to that. But that we'll talk about that later. In terms of it actually becoming Mount Doom, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a great visual scene. That and the episode after too, where they're walking through,
the red,
all the ash was cool. It was a cool look. I don't know how they did that, but that was fantastic. Hopefully, they didn't have to breathe in all that crap. Hopefully, it was a lot of CG and fog machines.
I was gonna say the battle that the Southlanders put up when they're in their village and waiting, and it's like it ends up being they're fighting their own people. They're just dressed up like orcs.
Yeah, that was a good little moment, right?
That was. I think it dragged on a little too long. I felt like that could be said for a lot of the battles, but most of the fighting I feel like I watched in this show was even when they fought. Well, actually, I kind of liked when they fought the troll in the first episode. It was very quick. You saw the elves be awesome. Yeah. Which is how elves should be in battle. But so the battle, the Southlanders like drawing them in and like setting up all those traps and everything, and then it ends up that the orcs anticipated it.
Yeah, good little twist. Remind me like a Walking Dead type episode where you have like the skinwalkers or something. You're not expecting it. So kind of a fun twist there. I did, as much as I enjoyed like the fight choreography, I thought it was well done, well lit, well shot. I feel like it was very predictable fighting. Like I didn't feel like I was surprised by anything. Like I kept thinking like, oh, you're drawing out attention from a moment that I know how it's going to play out.
Yeah.
And I hate when they do that. I hate that.
Drawing out attention where you know what's going to happen.
But we know, right? There's no point.
We just watched House of the Dragon, and we know what's going to happen. Anyone who has a basic understanding of the history of Game of Thrones, we know what's going to happen, but they still build the tension in the little things. I don't know if it's because of the time jumps. I don't know if it's because it's written better, but this show is like, we're building tension, but every single resolution, you know. And so you can't build tension that way. Instead, you're just slowly going through the story. That's what the biggest failure is there was nothing that didn't seem like there was any stakes for any of the characters involved.
No, because there's so many scenes of like somebody being held by an orc ready to be killed slowly, and like someone's gonna shoot an arrow on this orc's head, or a knife or something. And sure enough, and that happens, and it happens like 10 times that episode. This person's not gonna die, obviously. And then the mother like dies like 12 times and comes back to life. That episode, that was fun. Whatever. I was kind of hoping that kid would turn evil. That would have been rad. I was so excited for that. I'm like, oh, he found the knife and he's gonna like murder his family or something, and like it didn't happen. I'm like, whatever. He's a good guy. Fine.
It should have been him.
Yeah, it would have been
like,
fantastic. That would have been so tragic. It would have been amazing. It would have been so J.R. Tolkien to do. Yeah. And like, no, he's a good kid.
And it would have made sense because I know that was Trevor's big point is the sword hilt.
I mean, if we want to talk about those 3 points, I'll start with the first one.
Yeah.
The first one is that the biggest monumental thing happens is the creation of Mount Doom. And to do so, they need the hilt of Sauron's sword to go in and open up this big dam thing so the water goes into the
big dam thing
and activates the volcano and everything. But we never actually see it taken. This big deal thing. All we see is that Elf has it. He has it wrapped up in a thing.
It was a
he gives it to the kid. The kid opens it, and it's an axe. And at some point, when that was completely off screen, even though it's a pivotal moment in the show, it's not shown to us. It's the weirdest thing to have a pivotal moment not depicted on screen if it's part of your story. If it's not part of your story, that's fine. Or if like this leads to something you've seen before. But literally, our story is based on this happening, and we're not going to show it happen. It's just stupid.
Yep. I agree. I did not care for that reveal either. I actually watched the episode twice. Just because I wanted to nitpick it. No, I just wanted to nitpick it. I was like, something's off about this, and I don't know what it is. And I think you nailed it. Like the fact that they didn't show it. Like I just thought it was an editing issue, but I think it's just the fact that they never filmed that scene at all. Like being given to that guy, somebody stealing it from somebody and switching it out. Like I think that would have solved that issue. It was paced.
If you're telling a story, and just show us what to lead to that story. Like there's the failures of showing too much prequel story kind of thing. Like I now pronounce you Darth Vader for no reason, or now here you're running this stupid Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Yeah, we don't need to see certain things like that. But in a self-contained show, you need to show things that happens really in the story.
So I can see if maybe they wanted to like keep it a surprise, like when they unwrap it and have it be the axe, but then they should do like a callback as they show the old guy headed to deposit
They
the
could
hilt.
do like an Ocean's 11 thing where they show back how this is how it all actually ended up.
Because it most likely happened when the Numenorians came down on the village and started attacking them. The elf probably handed it to that guy and then made off with a duplicate, and they never thought to check it when they got it from him. Because when they go, when he drops it out in the woods, they never open it. You never see them open it. So they never check to see if it's the real thing, which, they should have. But
it's kind of important.
They just kind of assume that's what they were. Well, in fairness to Gladriel and Halbrand,
Halbrand.
They didn't know what they were after. Arondir is just like, he can't get away with it. And they're like, cool, we'll get it.
All right, we'll get it, whatever it is.
He has an item, don't let him get away. And so that's the most likely time that it happened, because the rest of the time they have the item.
So when you're telling a story and something pivotal happens, this isn't an area where you let the audience kind of try to figure it out.
No, it's not. I'm just saying.
It's not like an ambiguous ending. Like, now the audience can discuss. That's not this type of sequence in the middle of the series.
They can discuss in the middle of it right now.
How do you think this happened? This is where it could have happened, yes.
Yeah.
Also, an eagle could have come and grabbed it.
Always the eagles in Lord of the Rings.
It's the eagles, always. It's Deus Ex Machina.
Fly, you fools.
But yeah, so that one is episode, I don't remember, but the next one is Gandalf all of a sudden learns how to speak just by getting tossed into a wall. Like, why did he not know how to speak, and why did getting tossed into the wall activate his speech ability? there's something that hampering him? Did his memories get shaken loose? Would it be cool for them to show us a character that a lot of people like and identify with Lord of the Rings? Have him develop this kind of personality? Nah. Boom, he hit the wall. Look. Oh!
Suddenly I remember everything. Yes. Yeah, it would have been fun if they had at least given him his personality a few episodes before the finale as well, so instead of it being this big twist at the end when he says the line, they go, "Oh, I was right the whole time. It was Gandalf." All right.
They're trying to keep that. I guess I saw something because I did some research after the show that the whole point of the show was who is Sauron, because I guess that was what you were supposed to be guessing is which character you thought Sauron was out of like all the characters, and I'm like, I don't think any of these people are Sauron.
Yeah, the whole time I was kind of like, I don't think anybody is here.
And I think
that being Halbrand, like,
yeah, well, that's one of the issues I have with the show. I'm like, there's no actual like villain. Like, there's just like the idea of a villain, but there's no antagonist driving any of these stories.
No, I mean, that's kind of the problem with the Silmarillion. I mean, it's more of a textbook than anything. It's not meant to be a narrative.
It's not a story. It's just
so they had to build a story, and they didn't build a story for us.
They didn't build a story because they could have done anything. It would be like, hey, we're going to take the Marvel universe, but we're going to create a brand new planet. It's a different universe, and we can start from scratch and do whatever we want. Or we're going to go to Star Wars, and we're going to go 1,000 years before all of the Skywalker stuff. And there's just a general idea of what happened, but guess what? You can tell us what happened.
Yes, you could. I don't know. It could have been maybe more interesting to see Halbrand, I guess, be with the elves and the dwarves building the rings. And that could have been the show instead. With the events happening around them, maybe, Just a thought.
That kind of brings me back to like the hype phase of the show. When they first announced there was going to be a Lord of the Rings show, there was no premise for it. Nobody knew what it was going to be about. But I remember that there were rumors that it was going to be an anthology series where every season was going to focus on a different Lord of the Rings character. And that the first one would be about Aragorn. And I was like, oh my God, like just going about like Aragorn's whole upbringing, like
would have been fun, right?
Yeah, him and his mom escaping, him being raised by elves, him becoming a ranger and going on those adventures, because those stories don't exist. There's like a loose outline of how they happen. And I love Aragorn. He's like one of my favorite characters from the original series. And so I was like super excited for this. I was like, oh my God. And then they're like, oh, it's gonna be the Rings of Power. And I'm like, I guess that's cool too.
Okay. It's like,
fine.
thanks for giving me more. But this, okay.
But I feel like it would have been so fun to just pick characters. Like they could have done a whole season just about Gandalf and him coming to Middle Earth and building stories around him. And instead they tried to replicate what they did in Lord of the Rings of having all those different species and all those different storylines happening simultaneously. But they never, like, the funny thing is there were 4 storylines. 3 of them kind of joined, and then there's Gandalf and the Hobbit.
Right, that's a thing that never crossed paths.
It never crosses anyone. I was like, that's very weird.
Especially because the idea that he comes in kind of as an asteroid to help Middle Earth when it's in a time of crisis should be connected somewhere, somehow, rather than completely isolated story.
Yep.
And I agree. It was weird. Season 2, but
what they could have also done though is different timelines. Like I told Michelle, it would be cool if the story where Mount Doom is created is actually a different timeline, and then the Gandalf story is a different time. Like they're different timelines, and so that way they can happen at the same time to the viewer. But then you find out that Middle Earth is actually having to, like, this is what, and then Gandalf or whatever stumbles upon, and he just references, oh, there was this battle of the Southlands or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's how
we were watching a different timeline the whole time.
That would have been cool. And then they throw that out of the water because when they come upon their like little hobbit camp, they're like, oh no, it's been destroyed by fire asteroids from the volcano.
There you go, fire asteroids.
Whatever.
Fun.
And then the one leader hobbit's like, oh yeah, this happens quite regularly. I was like,
all
what?
the time. What? Huh? All right, so one thing, just because I will forget this, and I don't want to. Speaking of the hobbitlings, Nori and her band of small people, I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm very keen on like how things are filmed, and it felt like those scenes were filmed differently, almost like a whole entire different film crew, and it probably was, but it felt like a whole different show when I went to them. Like everything else is filmed in a certain style, and you go to this, and it felt very like early '90s TV movie of the week kind of feel to it. I don't know how else to describe it. Like I don't know, almost like episodes of Firefly or that kind of nature, where they go out into the woods and they blow a little bit of smoke on the ground, and suddenly you're on a new planet, and it felt very hokey. I did not care for those scenes at all. I enjoyed Nori as a character. I thought she was fun, but as far as those scenes were, I did not care for that. Every time they went to them, like, oh, here we go again. These guys.
I like Poppy more than Nori personally, and
I think she was great too.
I really thought in that last episode when she runs up, I'm like, this is gonna be like Frodo and Sam, and Poppy's like, I'm coming with you.
I'm coming with you
later. Bye. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So much for
that was
Hobbit
strange.
friendship.
I know, but that was a missed opportunity.
It really was. I think it would have, because they like those Poppy and Nori. I think they had good chemistry as like friends, and now we don't have that, and now we just have to rely on Nori and Gandalf, and I feel like that's just it. It doesn't have that same charm that like Frodo and Gandalf did. So true. I'm like, yay, Gandalf, but I don't love that Nori is his only Hobbit companion.
Yeah.
As they go off to Rune.
But I mean, Gandalf, like you told me, is going to walk the lands for 1,000 years or whatever.
That's how he knows
Nori's going to die really soon. Yep. And then what's he going to do?
He'll pick up new companions. He's friends with everybody.
True, he is.
The elves call him Elendil.
Then maybe they should make a Gandalf show where he just befriends little people.
That would be great. Also,
Gandalf
when do hobbits start smoking? Because I feel like that's such a big part of their character.
Yeah, they weren't smoking yet, so it's gonna happen eventually.
But I mean, I also like I said, I looked up like when they find like I guess there's like three
once
breeds,
they settle, right?
3 breeds of hobbit, and like 2 of them like cross and they end up becoming the hobbits of the Shire and stuff, and the other hobbits are like what Smeagol is. So like I said, the show definitely had me go into all of my Lord of the Rings lore and like read up on it, and I'm like, maybe I'll read the Silmarillion now. It definitely re-heightened my interest in Lord of the Rings, but in a way where I'm like, I want to read how things actually happened and not the way the show portrayed them.
It's like wanting to find out what George R. R. Martin actually has his final book say rather than
the show.
Of the show. Yeah.
Yes.
It inspires you to know the actual ending.
Oops.
But I definitely see your point about it. Definitely felt like every time that the Hobbit scene came on, or the Harfoots, it felt different from the rest of the show.
Yeah.
It reminded me, like, when I watch the movies, there's always that one storyline that I pay less attention to because I'm not as involved, like, I don't care about it as much as the other ones.
I wonder if you just need a different crew because they have to shoot that size difference thing.
Maybe.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
And there's just some people who are better at shooting that, and maybe they're not better at shooting action sequences, so you need a different...
Oh, you're right.
Entirely different
that is true.
eye of the camera, and so other things play out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just didn't care for it. It didn't feel like Lord of the Rings to me. So that's fine. I mean, I guess it is technically a TV movie type deal, right? It's on TV.
And each episode is the length of a movie, so
it was very long. And I usually like long movies, but man, when nothing happens for an hour and a half.
It's such an interesting contrast too, because again, House of the Dragon decides to do these time jumps where now we're 10 years ahead all of a sudden, and this show was like, we're gonna go thousands of years in the past, but we're gonna look at it every single day
in a microscope.
Like one little period of time that happened. It's such a weird decision to make.
I agree. It would have been really
cool. So much time to potentially jump. They could jump around all the time. Each episode could have been an anthology by itself. Here's 1,000 years ago. Here's 800 years ago. Oh, here's only 200 years ago. And they could do whatever they want in different parts of Middle Earth.
I want to see the story about Galadriel's daughter marrying Elrond.
I want to see when Galadriel stops being so hardcore. He finally gets her to stop hunting Sauron.
I want to see how she, I guess, develops her ability to read people's minds, even though I was pretty sure she was born with that ability.
Right? Kind of weird.
But speaking of Sauron and Galadriel, so my third part is, how come Sauron didn't kill her? Like, how come he just leaves her in the river? And how come we don't see
all
a
these
resolution
things, right?
of that sequence, since it's such a pivotal connection between them and the entire future of Middle-earth?
No idea. Yeah, it's a great question. Doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I also like how Galadriel just doesn't tell them. Like, she doesn't tell the elves or anybody else, hey, by the way, that was Sauron. My bad.
She's like, I'm going to keep that secret.
But that was him.
And also, I've been hunting him, and I'm telling everyone that he's back and he's around, and we didn't officially kill him. And everyone's like, nah, we're going to send you on a boat away to the promised land or whatever. And so she finally has her proof, and she's like, nah.
Well, it's funny because what Gil-galad says in the first episode is, we have foreseen that if Galadriel keeps hunting this evil, she will be the vessel for its return. And she is.
Yeah. So there you go.
Otherwise, he would have just stayed in Numenor and probably eventually destroyed Numenor and then come to Middle-earth anyways. But
yeah, pretty much. He would have found a way. Doesn't make any sense.
He's Sauron. He always finds a way.
I just didn't care for the actor that played him. I don't know. Didn't do much for me as an actor. I knew he was going to be somebody. I'm like, okay, this guy is a stranger as well. We don't know who he is. So that means he's somebody important. And I just didn't care. The whole series, I didn't care who he was going to be. And when they revealed him as Sauron, I just was like, okay, sure. I just didn't care. I wasn't angry or sad, mad, anything. I was like, okay, fine. Don't care.
It's
whatever.
It's funny too, because so when we finished it, Trevor queued up Fellowship of the Ring, and we watched the opening sequence where Galadriel narrates,
which is amazing, right?
Yeah, that whole like original War of the Ring or the last, whatever, I can't remember what it's called. Sauron is huge.
Yeah,
he's so large. I'm like, what is that? Just all armor?
Like, what happened, right?
Like,
we don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me. I will say the opening to that movie is better than the entirety of the series.
It's a good opening.
Well, just that opening also emphasizes that Isildur is the one who cuts off his fingers and cuts off the ring.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And we know that the race of man doesn't live as long as elves. And so Sauron is here right now. He's just made it to Mount Doom for the first time. And within Isildur's lifetime, where in Fellowship, he looks like he's maybe 40. And say on the show, he's like 20. So in the next 20 years, Sauron's going to rise to power and then get defeated.
That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Numenorians do live longer than normal humans. It's like a whole thing. Like Aragorn.
Not that longer, but yes.
Not that longer, that's true. Not 2,000 or 1,000 years longer.
Right.
So it might be like 60 to 80 years, but it's still very short in comparison. Like the timelines don't feel like a lot of things happening don't feel like they match up. Like I feel like Mordor should have already existed at this point when the rings are already forged. For sure. Because like the whole battle happening and the forging the rings, I think those do happen in a relatively close time span. But
that's what I thought. The dude needed the fire that was so hot, and that's why they needed Mordor created, whatever his name is, the ring creator guy.
Yeah, yes.
Celebrimbor?
Yeah, I thought.
Yes.
In the first second episode, he mentions like, "Oh, we just don't have hot enough fire," and I was like, "Oh, they're gonna have to go to Mordor, and that's what's gonna do it." But
yes,
I mean, maybe that's how Sauron goes and builds his, but it goes against the Elven rings. They figured out another way, and it just was a weird reason to create. Like, there's no reason to create Mordor within the scope of the show. It doesn't really have any impact on the show.
No, it was a strange point to do it when they did it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That should have happened like as a time jump kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where if they wanted
that's
to show
why that could have been way in the past.
It should have been way in the past.
And then Galadriel's like, "Nah, I'm gonna ride my horse through all these different timelines just to show that they're happening all at the same time."
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of slow motion horse riding in this show.
That was weird, right? That was weird. I don't understand that.
I watch regular Lord of the Rings now.
I feel sad. I'm gonna watch the originals. Bye.
Trevor doesn't want to. They're too long.
Yeah, they are.
Not long enough.
I'm Lord of the Rings'd out.
Never.
I just watched 9 episodes that were an hour and a half each. Okay.
And so you can sit through one that's 4 hours. We can
exactly.
pause it.
There
It's
you
like
go.
watching 4 episodes. Just watch an hour every night.
You can do
He
it.
said he'd watch
Trevor.
Fellowship again, just not the extended one, and I don't know if I can do that.
Okay.
We just watched Fellowship extended version last year.
But you don't remember it.
It was too boring. There was all these
This
parts they should have
guy.
cut out because it was extended.
Nope. That's wrong. That's wrong. I don't agree with that at all.
What Peter Jackson needs more than anything is someone to tell him no.
Maybe for the Hobbit films,
Yes,
but not for the Lord
but
of
the
the
original
Rings films.
trilogy is.
Yeah, perfection. That's good
Have we
stuff.
said everything we had to say? Is that it all?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that I was thinking of that I was angry
The word
about. I think I
CGI
got
was horrible.
there's a lot of CGI that was pretty bad, but there's some pretty good. I did not
I
care
know.
for. I didn't care for the Numenorians. I'm just gonna say it. I
No,
enjoyed Numenor, like what you said, but I did not care for them. I did not care for their
No.
their characters or their clothing.
They were
saying.
dressed like Romans.
Yeah, it looked like it was the Roman.
Yeah, but it
Empire.
looked like Romans that like had felt on, like they were made out of like Muppets. I'm like, I don't know who designed these costumes, but they used cheap fabric.
I just
That
wish
looked
they'd
too
gone
clean.
into why the Numenorians hate elves now. They
Yeah.
just kind of talk around it, but
They
they
just
never really
talked
talk
about it.
about the
I mean, they
why.
just threw it in there, right?
Like, I'm sure, like, I could read about it, but I'm like, okay, but obviously, like, the elves raised Numenor out of the sea as a gift to the Numenorian people. And then the Numenorians are like, well, we hate you now. Go away. Never come back. Like, if somebody had raised my home out of the ocean, I would probably be like, thank you. Visit whenever you want. Please do not sink our island into the ocean.
It was like 1,000 years ago, though. And now, just think of all the things that happened over the course of decades. Like, the race of man is just the worst.
It is the worst.
And so they'll just come up with reasons to hate everyone else. I mean, we've
That's
seen
true.
that in every form you
Yeah.
possibly
That's true.
could.
They're just always the worst. Especially, you know what? They're the freaking descendants or the ancestors of Gondor. And the people of Gondor are just the worst. They are just bad.
So there you go. I don't know. I
wonder
should have cared for
where-
them more, at least, though.
Yeah. I agree with you, Prague. There was no character that I was really invested in at all.
I mean, I enjoyed like Arindir. Like, I like that character because he's a
Yeah.
badass elf. But I just didn't really care about the character. I was like, it was cool when he was on screen, but that was about it.
I liked Elendil. That's who I like. Since I'm like, oh, the future king of
Yeah.
Gondor.
I liked when it was over. That was my favorite part. It ended, and I was like, we can watch something else now.
And we are.
We are. We're watching a show that feels like it's an hour long, or it feels like it's 30 minutes long.
And it is 30 minutes long.
Yeah, it goes a lot
I know.
happens. It feels like there's an hour worth of content in 30 minutes. There we go.
I know what
how
show
to
you're
phrase it
talking
right.
about, and I agree. So, yeah.
Save
We'll
it
talk
for a
about that
future
maybe
podcast.
eventually.
Yeah.
We can actually talk about that one. But yeah, that's all I have on this show. It's fine. I'm sure that I know there's people that do love this show, and some people really do care about it. So good job. Good for you.
Shout out to those people. I wish I
Glad
was one
they
of those
found
people,
something they love.
honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
mean,
want
I
so
don't hate
badly-
this.
Yeah. I definitely, it's not
Yeah.
Dune.
Yeah, so who cares?
That's what Michelle said when I was really complaining about the middle of this, and she said at least it's not Dune, and I was like, at least Dune was only 3 hours.
Wow.
This is like this is an extended version of Dune.
No. At least this
Okay.
doesn't have Timothy Chalamet in it.
I don't care about him.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
No.
There you go. That should be the tagline for this, I guess.
At least
this
there's no
doesn't have-
Timothy Chalamet. No, honestly, like, I'm intrigued by what they do with season 2. I felt like season 1 was so much unnecessary setup that they
Yes.
didn't have to do. It's the same thing with House of the Dragon was the same way, where the whole season was just unnecessary setup for what people actually wanted to watch the show for. But so we'll see. Maybe season 2 will be better, or they'll get new writers, or I know they already recast a character, so
Oh,
And then I know they cut the budget and they're not filming.
and they're
in
not
one
filming in New
location.
Zealand,
Yeah.
so
So that's promising.
always promising.
season 2 is looking good.
Yeah. I think the worst part the show has going for it is that the movies exist. Mm-hmm. And that it also came out as the same time as House of the Dragon. Like, House of the Dragon is simply a better show. And that it has two comparisons it fails at. And that's really tough to survive.
Fair point.
Well, it did well enough that they're still making a season 2. So.
They greenlit the season before it aired.
Oh.
They did.
They bought the rights to Lord of the Rings. And
they're going to use them.
Tolkien Estate essentially turned down more money from Netflix because Netflix was like, they had 10 different projects they planned for the Lord of the Rings IP. And they're like, whoa, calm down. We don't want that much. That's too much. And so Amazon, they're like, here's our single show. And they're like, yeah, this is boringly crap. They'll green light that.
I think that's the worst part, is that the Tolkien Estate greenlit this project.
This is great.
I don't know how much they knew about it or how much of a hand they played in it, or because clearly it wasn't about money.
No, that's what's so weird.
It was about the integrity of the property, which I felt like wasn't upheld.
Yeah, it's like...
and not in the way all the freaking
when
whiny...
you make the layers thinner and thinner, like in the Mickey Christmas Carol where he's cutting off the bread and there are these little tiny slivers for Tiny Tim. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to do that to the Lord of the Rings IP.
It's like butter spread across too much toast.
Nicely said, both of you. Those are good references.
Bilbo Baggins says that.
So, everyone, let us know what you thought of Rings of Power. Is it better than The Hobbit? Is it better than the original trilogy? Is it the best Lord of the Rings thing? Is it the best fantasy show ever? Let us know. Are we completely off base?
Maybe.
Until next time, we hope you enjoy, and we'll talk to you next time.
Prog out.
Bye.
All right, let's take a picture.